Mic check, mic check, test, 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 test.
Are we good to get started, everybody? Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today is Tuesday, November 18th, 2025, and this is the regular meeting of the Litchfield Elementary School District Governing Board. I hereby call this meeting to order. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could please stand and join us. Next, we will take a moment of silent reflection. Okay, next we will move on to our recognitions and celebrations, and this will be led by Executive Director Nuanez.
Good evening, President Zaidama, Governing Board members, Superintendent Davidson, my fellow cabinet members, and members of our community, both in attendance and online. Tonight we'll be celebrating two amazing groups of people that we have here in LASD, which are our veterans and our principals. This evening we are deeply honored to recognize a remarkable group of individuals, our veterans, who have chosen to continue their service by dedicating themselves to the students of Litchfield Elementary School District. Unfortunately, there's quite a few of us that were not able to make it tonight, but we still have a few veterans still here. Dr. Stone, myself, Moss, and I see a few others in the crowd. Your commitment to our nation is a testament to courage, sacrifice, and the unwavering resolve. And your decision to bring that same spirit of service into our classrooms, offices, and school communities is a gift that strengthens our district every single day. We are profoundly grateful not only for your service to your country, but for the service you continue to give LASD 7-9. Your leadership, integrity, compassion enrich the lives of our students and inspire us who have the privilege of working alongside you. Tonight, we celebrate you. Thank you for choosing to serve, for choosing our students, and most of all, for choosing the Litchfield Elementary School District to serve. Now, could you please, I invite you all to come take a picture with Dr. Davidson and President Zaidama. That's our veterans. Our veterans. Yep.
Samuel, tell, and will you remind everybody of the food?
Yes. Also, too, there's some cookies back here for all our principals and our veterans, community members. Feel free to make yourself home. All right, continue on. There you go. Pass out those cookies. They're really good, and they look nice. All right, thank you. All right, on to our second group. Continue on. As October came to an end, we wrapped up National Principals Month. So tonight we come together to honor, recognize, and celebrate our outstanding school leaders, also known as our principals. Your selfless dedication to your students, your staff, and your school communities is truly commendable. Student success does not happen arbitrarily. It is the result of intentional leadership, thoughtful decision-making, and the tireless work of committed professionals like all of you, who guide and support our learners every step of the way. Because of your leadership, our students are not only achieving, they are thriving. And a bit later, you will hear as Director of Assessment and Accountability, Brian Owen, highlight some of that success. You help them succeed as they progress through their educational journey from elementary, middle school, on to high school, college, and beyond. Your influence shapes not just their academic paths, but their confidence, their character, and most of all, their dreams. So, to Amanda Acosta, Barbara B. Roby, Tanya Rodiger, Corte Sierra, Michelle Hill, Dreaming Summit, Denise Lundberg, Litchfield Elementary, Leslie Willis, Mabel Pageant, Dr. Kimberly Hill, Palm Valley, Vanessa Zuniga, Rancho Santa Fe, Kara Fox, Scott L. Libby, Sarah Fantasia, Verado Elementary, Courtney Frazier, Belen Soto, Meredith Noche, Verado Heritage, Luke Janke, L. Thomas Heck, and Troy Gilbert Elementary, Christy Sartiano, Verado Middle, Cassie Harge, Western Sky Middle, Kyle Martinez, White Tanks Learning Center, and Sarah Rosenthal, Wigwam Creek Middle School. Thank you for leading your students and staff to believe, belong, and become the best Litchfield learners possible. Your impact is profound, and we are grateful for everything that you do for us every single day. Guess what's next? And if anybody wants to share any words, feel free to come up to the podium.
Sam, yeah. Intro every day when I walk into my campus. It felt real good.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, feel free to partake in the cookies on your way out. And Vanessa, we see you out there, we hear you, and we miss you.
Oh, Sam, your cookies, make sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Moss, for making sure they all take cookies. Thank you all for coming so that we could celebrate you, and we also understand if you now want to leave and go home to start your evening. Thank you. We are now going to move on. Since we have no public request to speak, we will skip that and move on to the adoption of the agenda and consideration of the consent agenda. I'll go through and see if anybody has any items that they wish to pull. Ms. Moran?
Yes, I would like to remove items 6.1 and 6.11, both of the out-of-state travel requests.
Do you mean 6.10?
Yes, 6.10, sorry,
Okay,
and 6.11, the out-of-state travel requests.
gotcha. Mr. Owens, did you have anything you wanted to remove?
I do not, thank you.
Mr. Mikes?
No.
Ms. Wallace?
No, thank you.
Okay. With that, if someone would like to make a motion.
I move to adopt the consent agenda minus items 6.10 and 6.11 as presented.
A second?
Having a motion for Mr. Owens and a second for Mr. Mikes, I will call for the vote. Ms. Moran?
Yay.
Mr. Owens?
Yay.
Mr. Mikes?
Yay.
Ms. Wallace?
Yay.
I'm also a yay. Motion passes. Okay, with that, we will now move on to, I guess that will be 7.1 for the approval of out-of-state travel requests to attend the Cisco Live Conference. Ms. Moran, I'll let you start with your questions.
Yes, so as I think we all know, districts have been under scrutiny for out-of-state travel requests. So I will be pulling all out-of-state travel requests going forward so that we can discuss those and make sure that we as a board are in line with approval of those. So on the first one, which is now 7.1, this is a pricier conference than normally what we see. So my primary questions, and I read the letters that were attached. Thank you for the additional information. I appreciate that. I'm not opposed to this. I know that our networks are in desperate need, so I completely get that. I am just wondering how, I guess my question is this the most effective conference to get us what we need, really based on how much of our current networks are Cisco, or do we plan to implement more Cisco products? Because I know that they're pretty specialized.
Governing Board President, members of the board, sorry, it's kind of, to answer that question, we just utilized last year, my first year's E-rate money, to replace everything in-house with Cisco. So we are moving to be a full Cisco house here in Litchfield. We still do have Ruckus access points. However, Troy Gilbert is going to be built with Cisco access points. So Troy Gilbert will be our first all Cisco. And to your comment about this conference, it is a week-long, fully deep dive into everything Cisco. We get to see what we're doing with our latest switches. It gives us the opportunity to talk to Cisco TAC, which is their engineers, on some issues that we are experiencing now, hands-on labs. It is a week-long, fully immersed in the opportunity to talk to engineers, see latest and greatest, and then some of the main big things are security. So we're really working to improve our posture in the security landscape here as well. So those are some of the key points.
Okay, great. And I don't disagree with going, especially based on the feedback that you just supplied. So Troy Gilbert will be all Cisco. I know Cisco is pretty proprietary, and then we'll be migrating as we need to. We have some sort of plan for that over the next few years, that we need really a Cisco expert and a backup Cisco expert on staff in order to be able to maintain and keep these networks working, correct?
Correct. We're utilize E-rate funding to save on the district. So
Okay.
as E-rate funding, the devices that we currently have were purchased with E-rate, the Ruckus. They're still good, but as those start to age out, we're going to slowly start replacing with all Cisco. So I foresee us in the next 5 years, Litchfield will be 100% a Cisco product in-house.
Okay, great. And I know on the surface, this, as I mentioned earlier, is a more pricey conference than our staff normally goes to. However, I know this is a drop in the bucket compared to hiring consultants to come in and help with some of these issues. So the fact that you're getting 5 days worth of training, and like you mentioned, there's some deep dives and things like that, makes me in favor of this conference. So thank you for the additional information.
Board Member Rand, excuse me. One of the opportunities Cisco provides
their clients is learning credits, but because we buy them through E-rate and we save a large price due to a certain frame reduced percentage that we maintain, we don't earn those credits anymore, which is what we've done in the past with Mr. Cruz, was to utilize those credits to discount that cost. But they've changed their model, and so hopefully this isn't a repetitive thing every year, because we do agree, like, the cost is definitely more than what we've seen us use in the past, and it will require us to dig into what are the local ones that we still have access to it. Ruben and some of his team will participate in the cybersecurity here locally with the state in December, but we will continue to be mindful of that as we do that. But we have been able to use those E-rate funds to make sure that the cost of Cisco isn't really impacting us the way it would if we were not.
Okay, great. Thank you for that information. No other questions from me.
Mr. Owens, did you have any questions or comments?
No questions, thanks.
Mr. Mikes?
No, I don't have any further questions. I appreciate you pulling it from there so we can kind of suss out some of this information, but I think it's great steps and great use of resources that we're moving forward with, so thank you.
Ms. Wallace?
No questions, thank you.
I don't have any questions, but I just know as a wife of an IT director that IT conferences and all of that stuff are pretty pricey. So this, to me, while it is pricier than what we're used to as a board seeing for what our admin staff and when we send other people to conferences, seems pretty reasonable for a week-long conference. So I am glad that you guys are getting this opportunity, pending approval, to do this. And with that, if somebody would like to make a motion.
Can I make a motion? Is that what you said, President?
Yes,
Zyman?
please.
Sorry. I move to approve item 7.1 as presented.
I second.
Having a motion from Ms. Moran and a second from Mr. Mikes, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Moran?
Yay.
Mr. Owens?
Yay.
Mr. Mikes?
Yay.
Ms. Wallace?
Yay.
I'm also a yay. Motion passes. Next, we're going to move on to 7.2, which will be the out-of-state travel request to attend the RTM conference. Ms. Moran?
Yes, so as I stated earlier, I will just blanketly be pulling all of these. Obviously, this one is not very much of a cost impact. Can you refresh my memory, though? Did we already approve some people to go to this conference, or is this a first request?
Madam President and Ms. Moran, the board did approve my opportunity to attend an RTM conference earlier in September of this year. And so I did attend on our behalf at an RTM conference.
Okay, but this is a separate one.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, because I think I did some research at that point in time, and it definitely seems like a very valuable conference. And is the reason that the event cost is zero is because you are presenting? Our staff that's going is presenting?
Yes, ma'am. RTM will cover a certain cost associated with travel if you are attending as well as presenting.
Okay.
And Ms. Moran, just to add a little extra information to this request, it was during that time in September when I had a chance to attend a variety of sessions, not just from a vendor perspective, but also fellow educators across the nation as they shared their story and their success stories. And so as I heard and listened, I thought this would be a great opportunity for us as Litchfield L to share what we're doing around actualizing our strategic plan and putting in things in place such as our scorecard, and just felt like it would be a great experience, not just for our team to present, but also to share the success that Litchfield is having. So I've been working behind the scenes to give us a chance to share on a national forum some of the work that our team is involved in. So that's how the opportunity came about.
Great, I think that's fantastic. I love to hear that we are tooting our own horn, if you will. No other questions from me.
Mr. Owens, did you have any questions?
No questions.
Mr. Mikes?
None for me.
Ms. Wallace?
No questions.
I don't have any questions. If someone would like to make a motion.
I move to approve item 7.2 as presented.
I second.
Having a motion from Ms. Moran and a second from Mr. Owens, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Moran?
Yay.
Mr. Owens?
Yay.
Mr. Mikes?
Yay.
Ms. Wallace?
Yay.
I'm also a yay. Motion passes. Okay. We are going to move on to the next section, discussion items. We will start with the Troy Gilbert Elementary School construction update. This will be by Dr. Stone and Mr. Ensign.
Madam President, members of the governing board, Dr. Davidson, Dr. Stone and I are proud to present the construction update for Troy Gilbert Elementary. You'll see a lot of photos because there's 1,000 words that go with every photo, right? And so we'll just move right on. So far, we've completed as you can see, the schematic design, the design process, the groundbreaking ceremony that we had in May. Construction started shortly after that in June. And our masonry top out, which is a major milestone in construction, occurred on October 31st. Currently, we're working on the school facilities board, approving our adjacent ways verification. That was delayed due to some permit issues that we've had with the county in updating some of those things with pricing and such. The building envelope dry-in, which is a major component, which is ironic that we're talking about it today, will occur probably around January, depending on how much this rain affects us. Substantial completion is still looking at the summer, this 2026, with district furniture, fixtures, and equipment going in mid-July as well. School is still opening in August, and we're on track for that. Here's an outline of the campus that you've seen before, just reminding you what our campus will look like. The contractor, Core Construction, has a drone that they fly over the site about once a week, so they get multiple views around the site. They also go inside of every room and do a 360 of every single room. So we have really good opportunities to not only see the progress, but be able to look back in the future and see why or what has happened. Here is May, about the time of that groundbreaking, when you can see that they kind of cleared a few things and set up the fencing. And here's mid-October, where you can see all of the buildings from a bird's eye view from the northwest, looking with the white tanks in the back. Here's another shot from the southeast, about the same time. As you can see, a lot of the masonry has been mostly done at that point. This was just a couple weeks ago, right before we created this presentation. As you can see, that's the gym in the foreground right there, with the kitchen and the cafeteria. Behind it with the roofing trusses and decking on is the admin building and a couple classrooms. Here's an inside view of what you might see from the contractor as they go into every room and do a 360, so they can kind of see the progress. This is building 300, which is the furthest along building. So they're starting with that one, and then they're moving to other classrooms. They're working on the classrooms first, and then they'll move over to the administration and the gym and cafeteria and kitchen. Building 100, that's our administration building. As you can see, none of the studs are in, but it has a roof that's been completed at that point. When I say roof, that's just the trusses and the decking. The roofing is starting. It was supposed to start on Saturday. They pushed it. I haven't heard back from them again, but it'll start in the next couple days. I took a panorama in our weekly meetings. We walk each week with the contractor through the site and go over the happenings and inspecting things and making sure that they're where they should be per the plans. This is a panoramic view of the courtyard, which is something that they do not do. Core doesn't do one in the courtyard, but if you were to walk out of the admin building, this is the first shot that you will see as you walk out to greet your student or go to their classroom on a particular day. On the right there's a contract architect and some contractors in the background as we're walking through. I'm open to any questions that you might have for us.
Ms. Moran, did you have any questions or comments?
I don't have any questions, but I really appreciate this presentation because it's exciting. I'm glad that we are making progress. I can see the vision coming together, and I'm really excited for our students and staff that will be going there in August. So thank you so much.
Mr. Owens?
Yep, no questions. It's exciting to see that obviously we're on track, and that's the goal. And then the pictures, they just make it seem more and more real every time that, oh, there's a roof, right? So, cool, thank you.
Mr. Mikes?
Yeah, no questions for me. I appreciate all the transparency with everything, kind of keeping us up to date with everything. I guess that's maybe why I don't have really too many questions for how you guys have handled the process and everything, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Ms. Wallace?
No questions. Looking good.
I don't have any questions either. You guys are doing great. Thank you for all that you're doing. They talked a little bit when we went to our LTH school showcase last week about just random details they're working on, and just there's so many things you don't think about. Like, are they making sure to have the right colors? And just silly things that really matter. Like, you don't think it'll matter, but it really will matter, and somebody will complain about it if we do it wrong. So I appreciate everybody that's working on this project and making sure that everything is done correctly and to the Litchfield standard that we are expecting. So thank you guys.
One request is just at whatever point you deem is appropriate, we would love to get on the campus and see at some point in the construction process. So a tour would be fantastic.
Mr. Jenke did invite us to come out on a Thursday if we want to when they do their walkthrough when we came to the showcase. So
Yeah, we do have weekly meetings on Thursdays that we would be able to. Just let us know ahead of time. Wear closed-toed shoes and long pants.
and we can all wear our hard hats that we have.
There you go.
Thank you very much for the information.
Thank you.
Okay, next we are going to move on to 9.2, operational fund balances and reserves presentation from CFO Vaughn. This is less exciting than the last presentation. Sorry, Michael Vaughn.
Am I allowed
want more
to agree
pictures.
with that?
I'm sorry, what?
Am I allowed to agree with that?
I mean, you can. It is factually true, so.
Yes. Okay. Madam President, members of the Governing Board, Superintendent Davidson, colleagues, and community, thank you for joining us tonight to discuss the district's approach to operational fund balances and reserves. Tonight's presentation aligns with the district's strategic pillars, but of resources, but has impact on all areas of the district's strategic plan. Additionally, this presentation aligns with Governing Board Policy 3-101.01 on fund balance. Reserves are effectively the district's emergency fund, and just like in your personal finances, determining the amount of an emergency fund you want to hold is a balancing act. You want to make sure that you have enough to mitigate your risks, but there's not much benefit in having too much. To help ensure the district is taking a critical, risk-based approach to our reserves, the district evaluates the model published by the Governmental Finance Officers Association for operational reserves. And starting this year, as I mentioned, we've actually incorporated it into our board policy. The Governmental Finance Officers Association risk-based model asks governments to consider their risk exposure in several areas detailed on the slide. These include extreme financial events, revenue stability, expense volatility, leverage, liquidity, the extent operations are supported outside the general fund, growth, and the need for reserves for capital projects. The district has significant risk to extreme events, revenue stability, liquidity, and positions supported from other funds. The district experiences some risk due to inflation factors and expense volatility, which will actually serve a significant portion in our later conversations tonight, and some risk from leverage due to our energy water savings lease. Our bonds do not provide leverage risk due to being tied directly to a tax levy. This slide shows the inflation-adjusted base support level, or funding received per student, from 2002 to current day. This graph illustrates a couple of significant points. First, When the state has significant budget issues, as it did during the Great Recession, school districts can and have taken a cut. Second, inflation has had a significant impact on the district's purchasing power in the last couple of years. The inflation funding adjustments the districts do receive are not sufficient to keep up with inflation. We are currently operating on the equivalent of 2018 or 2019 per student support in terms of purchasing power. When we talk about reserves, the GFOA identifies their recommendations as a percentage of operating revenues. In Litchfield, we have identified these as our recurring M&O resources, as well as revenue from funds we consider part of the reserves. The various components are detailed on the slide. Sorry. The funds we consider part of our reserves include all the funds that can be used for fairly broad purposes, including all of those on the slide. However, I would like to point out a couple of these, including community schools funding, which supports our preschool and extended day programs. These fund balances are largely restricted to those two areas, at least in practice, until those programs are being operated sustainably. And gifts and donations, which includes a large amount of resources that are restricted at the school level, and so they may be more difficult to actually deploy as reserves if it came to needing to do so. Traditionally, auxiliary funds are also considered school-based funds. However, legally, there's not the same restrictions on use. The specific funds may become more significant a part of our discussions this year and in future years due to the structure of our reserves changing. And really what I mean by that is which funds the money is sitting in. As of last year, most of these funds, with the exception of Medicaid, gifts and donation, and impact aid, have ongoing expenses in them that closely match with the revenue that comes in. For 2026, meaning the current year, we proposed a position to be funded from the Impact Aid Fund, which means it now fairly closely aligns with expected expenses in that fund with the revenue that comes in. And later tonight, we'll talk more in depth about use for Medicaid. We'll need to manage moving forward the gradual shift this will cause in where our reserves are being held and ensure we're comfortable with the accessibility of our reserves. Based on the GFOA risk-based model and the district's characteristics, it is their recommendation and our governing board policy that our reserves should fall within 3.12 and 3.9 months of operating revenues. Litchfield ended last year with 4.1 months of reserves, which put the district at slightly above our targets. This played a role in our discussion on the 2026 budget, where we planned some level of spend down of the reserves with our budget planning. I will provide an updated analysis on our reserves in my next presentation tonight as we begin looking at multi-year forecasts. At this time, I'm available to answer any questions you may have on the district's approach to financial reserves.
Ms. Moran.
I appreciate the approach. We've obviously talked about this many times, and I was part of the approval of the original approach. But I will be a broken record in that I don't like us being above our upper limit. And I think that's going to resolve itself, which we will talk about in your next presentation. However, just for the trends, we're at 34.51% this year. Last year, we were at 34.14, and the prior year was 34.4. So it's hovered in this 34% range. Again, just, I feel like the upper limit is where we need to be, and I understand that likely that will be where we end next year, depending on how everything shakes out. So I think this is good, and I appreciate the transparency of the presentation.
Mr. Owens?
Yeah, I feel like this is the teaser before we find out what's going to happen. So I too agree that it's important to have this to be in the middle there, but I don't want to be over. We need to spend the funds where we can, when we can, but obviously next presentation, looking into the future, I know there's a lot of things that that we can't control, and we want to be ready for those, but looking forward to the next one.
Mr. Mikes?
No questions for me right now. Thank you.
Ms. Wallace?
No questions. I agree with what they both said. I'm all about spending our funds, but as they have let me know, we're going to do that.
I don't have any questions. We don't need to beat a dead horse. I think we're all on the same page about where we want to be, but your next presentation is going to explain how we're going to end up there anyways. So if there's no other questions or comments, I guess we'll move right into the next presentation with more exciting news. Not really.
Madam President, members of the Governing Board, Superintendent Davidson, colleagues, and community, thank you for joining us tonight to discuss the budget timeline and context for fiscal year 2027, which is still bizarre to say. Tonight's presentation aligns with the district's strategic pillar of finance, but impacts all areas of the district's strategic plan. Since I have been at Litchfield, we've taken an approach to budgeting that begins by taking a holistic view of the district's finances, trying to both balance reoccurring expenses to reoccurring revenues, but also looking at our reserve levels or one-time resources to determine what our best approach is for the coming year. During that process, it's regularly been asked why expenses typically, or almost always, come in under projection. Understandably, this can make it difficult when making strategic decisions at the board level. As a result of these conversations, each year I've worked to try to make our forecasts more and more realistic, as opposed to simply being conservative. This has taken the form of starting our budget conversations with prior year actual expenditures to capture typical vacancy savings in our forecasts, forecasting employee turnover when considering the potential cost of proposed raises, and studying how our actual spending by the end of the year relates to our encumbrances at various points in the year. The result is that we have more realistic forecasts. However, it is also an estimation process that could result in us coming in either above or below forecast. It really, truly is still an estimate. Tonight, we will update our forecast for 2026 and look at primary drivers behind the change since we last looked at it in March when the governing board approved the projected budget for this year. We will then briefly discuss some state and external factors we need to be tracking this year before closing with discussion on goals and focus for the budget process for 2027. This slide is from the March 6th presentation on the projected budget for 2026. You can see at the bottom of the second column that we anticipated overspending our M&O revenues by $2.8 million. As we move to the next slide, please note that 2025 has come off the forecasts, so 2026 will be in the first column, not the second. This slide shows our updated forecast of overspending M&O revenues by $3.9 million. We will now spend some time going through the primary drivers of this change. This slide shows that the change is being driven fairly evenly by updated expense and revenue estimates. We will begin our discussion on the expense side. The change in expense estimate is being driven by two primary significant factors: salary and benefits being higher than anticipated, and an increase in special education costs beyond what was included in the forecast. The change in salary and benefits are being caused by ultimately positive outcomes that simply cost more: reduced vacancies and reduced turnover. We will look at that more in depth here in a second. The change in special education forecast is being driven by contracted staff and outplaced students, which we will also look at more in depth in the coming slides. One of the ways we've worked to make our forecasts more realistic is to incorporate salary savings into the forecast by beginning with prior year actual expenses without modification for savings from vacant positions. And what I mean by that is in the forecast, we're not adding back costs, assuming that previously vacant positions become filled. Traditionally speaking, that results in a fairly accurate forecast, because even if that exact position is filled the next year, you very regularly have a like position somewhere in the district that might be vacant for the same period of time. This has worked well in the past due to vacancies being rather stable across the system. As a result of this forecasting, however, significant changes in vacancies can cause variances from the forecast. In this case, we saw a significant decrease in vacancies in special education aid positions, as well as teaching positions being filled by other methods than a traditional certified teacher, such as a long-term substitute or other programs such as the partnerships we have through certain universities. This resulted in an increase in salary and benefit costs from our forecast. We also saw decreased turnover in a number of employee groups that caused the raise to be more expensive than forecasted. As a result of the variability in this data, the forecasts you'll see tonight do not include a turnover reduction to the cost of the future raises. Next, we will talk about special education. Each year, as part of the forecast, we specifically include planned changes in special education costs, such as expanding a self-contained program to more classrooms, or a change in related service providers within the forecast. We also include an amount that we forecast simply based on historical trends of costs and student enrollment. For 2026, that amount was $1.4 million. And so to be clear, that amount that we put in our forecast isn't because we've identified any actual true change we intend to make in special education. It's simply trying to capture the trend that we see year after year in special education. However, special education costs are actually on track to be $2 million over from last year, excluding salary and benefits, which were included as part of our previous slides. This increase is being driven almost entirely by the cost of contracted staff and outplaced students. We'll first talk about outplaced students. Outplaced students are those students whose IEPs, or individualized education plans, require them to attend a more specialized school outside of the Litchfield Elementary School District. As a result, the district must pay tuition and other costs for transportation and related services to these schools. Very typically, the cost of supporting these students at these specialized schools is significantly higher than funding we receive for the student. This slide shows the change in the number of students being supported at each school and average cost of attendance, which includes tuition, as well as transportation, related services, and other costs. Our revenue through state funding formulas for these students range from $7,400 to $46,000, with the average being a little over $30,000 for context. This slide shows our outplaced student population grew by 6 or 33% year over year. We would like to celebrate with our families and special education team that 2 of these children are actually in the process of coming back to one of our schools. We all look forward to welcoming them back to our campuses. This slide shows a summary of contracted positions year over year. We can celebrate a reduction in special education aid positions. However, we've seen significant increases in contracted teachers and smaller increases in related service providers. In working with our special education team on this data, we believe the increase in contracted teachers is a result of an attempt to keep our special education coaches providing support as opposed to serving in that teaching capacity when vacancies arise. An additional component to contracted workers we want to bring forward is the wide use of contract agency workers serving as substitutes for our special education aides. We have spent $90,000 on this through October for those special education aides. In terms of our budget work, this simply reminds us that without further changes, there's not really opportunity to absorb this in M&O. I'd like to pause for questions on the expense side of our conversation prior to moving on to revenue.
Ms. Moran?
I mean, I have some overall questions that I'll wait until the end, but primarily here, you know, you provided us with some information on the outplaced students. So can you give me a number? You said the average in funding that we get is $30,000 per student, but we're obviously spending more than that. But I'm having a hard time coming up with, so I would compare the $2 million that it's costing us to the approximately $720,000 in funding that we're getting, and that would be the 24 students times $30,000. So let me do the math on that. 2050. So you're telling me we have over $1.3 million in expenses that are due to unfunded mandates. So our state legislators are making laws that are requiring us to spend $1.3 million more than what they are funding us for 24 students. Is that accurate? Approximately.
That seems approximately accurate. The reason I shared the revenue side and the expense side is simply to bring attention to the significant budget impact of the outplaced student population growing. And we'll talk about it when I get to the revenue side, but as your special education population grows, it does bring in more resources. It just simply doesn't bring in enough resources to cover the cost of providing those services, or in this case, paying other organizations to provide those services.
Okay, so do we have any control over any of those pieces?
So we're going to quickly get out of my realm of knowledge, but what I will say is whether or not a student attends one of these schools is an IEP team decision. Obviously, that IEP team includes a lot of different stakeholders, from those that work at Litchfield Elementary School District, but also the parents of those the providers of services to those children. The state does publish a list of authorized, if you will, private day schools. That's the term for these types of organizations. They're actually exempt from state procurement requirements, so we don't do, and I don't honestly know how we would do any sort of procurement work in this area. We do plan to look at, and this is obviously the very beginning step of this, the various costs associated to which school. They don't all provide the same types of services, so it's not as if you can just say, this is the cheapest one, this is the one we're sending our children to, because they all do provide different types of special ed services, but there may be some opportunity to, on the margin, impact this. I'll also bring attention to our White Tanks Learning Center. That is an attempt by Litchfield Elementary School District to keep the number of children that we're outplacing outside of the district lower. But that's also something that we'll need to really look at, because similar to everything else, there is a certain number of students that need to be there to make all the numbers make sense. So there are various things that we can do to influence this, whether it's you know, driving those conversations or identifying alternatives. But truly, the state basically gives districts a list, and that's who you can go to for these things.
Okay.
I hope I answered your question.
Yes, that does answer my question. I know we have a new director of special ed, so I'm hopeful maybe that can help to drive some of these conversations about placement. Don't get me wrong, I want what's best for students, but it is not fiscally responsible of me to say that the state is going to pay $1 and we're going to add $2 for all of these students to give them what is needed. The state obviously should step up and actually fund what they want us to spend, because this is coming at the cost of other students as well. So I would just like for that to be more in line. So I'm hopeful that we can make whatever decisions we might need to make, if there are some within our control, to make sure that the students are getting their needs met at the most cost-effective placement possible. And I'm not saying that hasn't happened in the past, but maybe with this now shining a light, we can come into that with more scrutiny or look into more options, because I understand we have a great special ed department, and that's why people move into our boundaries, and we have an obligation to serve them, and we want to serve them, but it is difficult to swallow the unfunded mandates for me personally. That's all I have on this portion. Thanks.
Mr. Owens?
Thank you, Mr. Owens. And Ms. Moran, I just wanted to comment on your piece regarding a new special education director. And I was having some conversation this morning with some of our administrative team who are in the special ed department, and it is true the turnover in that role over the last 3 years hasn't probably allowed us the opportunity to dig significantly deep in the cost associated with our outplaced children. And so I do think over time we can do some problem solving and not just talk programmatically, but also from a related service perspective, even to the transportation piece, and how we can maybe bring some of those costs and that manpower back to Litchfield instead of having to contract it out. So just it is an important piece that we have to remember. Stability does matter in some cases, and I think in that role it certainly will add value over time.
Yeah, and can I just add one more thing just for my other board members? So when we look at this special education increase, those expenses are going up 40%. 40% from what we forecasted. So it's a combination of things, but that's a massive increase that we can't sustain.
Mr. Owens, sorry.
Is this an issue for other districts?
Absolutely. So on Friday, I was at the business portion of Guppy Mac, which is the Greater Phoenix Education Management Coalition, something like that. And at the end, you know, they open it up for, is there anything else that the group would like to have further conversation with? And obviously I had my hand shoot up and say, can we just talk about special education cost containment? And everyone basically sighed and said, yes, if you think of anything, can you please let us know? I will say that as part of that conversation, I heard a couple of different things from my peer CFOs. One was just sharing with me what we're experiencing, which is it doesn't seem, no matter how much you forecast or set aside, that it's ever quite enough. that it's happening everywhere, but also that there is a study group coming out of the superintendent version of Guppy Mac on special ed cost containment. So they did ask for members of the business group that would be interested in joining that conversation, so I did volunteer. My hope is by doing that work both locally at Litchfield, but also being engaged in that conversation at a county and state level, is that I'll be exposed to as many ideas as we possibly can be as we work to address something that truly is a statewide and I would imagine, but don't have as much visibility into, that it's also a nationwide problem.
Yeah, it's just interesting. The first, you presented on two kind of bigger issues, and the first one is we're doing a good job that's costing us more money, right? And the other one is costing us money, and we can't do anything about it, honestly.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Mr. Mikes?
Yeah, I appreciate Board Member Moran pointing that out. I mean, it's a staggering cost that we have with it, and then trying to make sure we do what's best for kids as well. Additionally, I actually kind of had a question with, and I don't mean to catch you off guard if you don't know the answer, for the $90,000 through October for the substitutes, the contracted substitutes that we have. Is there like some sort of comparison that I have? I mean, is that kind of through the roof this year through October? Is it something, is there past couple years that we've had it? And maybe elaborate what, I mean, I don't know what that means.
Sure.
What does that mean for a substitute that's contracted for
So,
special services?
those substitutes are serving as substitutes for instructional assistants in our self-contained programs or for one-on-ones. Our use of that in prior years was a bit sporadic, so it is up. It seems to have become more widely used this past year. We have looked at alternatives. I don't know if you recall, and I apologize, I didn't look up what date the governing board approved it, but we did approve a substitute rate for classified employees to be pushed through ESI, which is the same provider of substitutes that our teachers, our certified positions, use. So we are working diligently to move that work from the contracted arena to, I suppose it's still technically contracted, but a much more advantageous contract than what is presently being used.
Okay, yeah, because I'm just trying to figure the math. I mean, it's only through October. We still have quite a few
Well, and
months
that's
to go.
why there's a slide later in the presentation, but we talk about next steps, and addressing that use is certainly a potential next step.
Right, and then last question I have for these outplaced places for these students, are these numbers that we have based on a full year, each year they attend? Like, I know you're saying we're potentially there's welcoming two that are coming back. Is it kind of a prorated piece per month, or how's it work with these?
It
places?
is a monthly tuition cost. So as those two come back, we will see a decline. A lot of these students stay there year-round, though. I mean, some do come back, but a lot are placed there for the year.
Thank you.
Ms. Wallace?
I don't have any questions. I agree with Ms. Moran that our legislators need to look at these funds, and there's not a lot that we can do about this, but when these are increasing at 40%, and it's affecting all schools across our state, this is going to be a big issue for a lot of people.
I don't have any questions. I hate the situation we're in, which is nobody's fault. Well, it's our legislators' fault, actually, but it's nobody's fault that's here in this room right now. And I appreciate that we're going to be looking at all the different creative, out-of-the-box ways that we can try to solve this problem, because at the end of the day, families come in and have IEP meetings, and we can't guarantee what they're going to need until they have their meeting. As a parent that has those meetings, I know what that's like, so some of these numbers are just kind of very shocking to see how much money it's costing us, and I agree our legislators need to do something about it. And at one point, they were talking about doing a study of special education costs, but who knows what actually happened with that, so I'll let you continue.
All right. Now we will look at the revenue side of the forecast. To forecast revenues, we ultimately have to forecast student counts and the resulting average daily memberships. We utilize the work of a demographer to forecast general education enrollment trends, which we utilize in our forecast. We also must forecast special education enrollment, which for that we've been using historical trends. Our enrollment this year is down around 100 students compared to forecast, and weighted average daily membership for our special education population did not grow as historical trends would have suggested it should. These changes are driving the change in revenue estimate. So what does this tell us about our special education situation? Each year, we estimate expenses based on what we know we are changing, as well as historical trends, and we have historically done the same with special education weighted ADM. However, in 2026, expenses are outpacing historical trends, and ADM is underperforming historical trends. This means our cost for educating special education students is growing compared to the resources we're given to support these students, which really just goes to the conversation the board's been having tonight. You might be wondering from our previous slide, if we're down 100 students, how can that result in only 37.9 reduction in ADM on the general education side? This is because a disproportionate amount of the decline, actually over 100 students, is from our kindergarten cohort. These declines in kindergarten are being partially offset by increases in other grades. Because kindergarten students are not funded as a full student by the state, the resulting decline in ADM is smaller than the number of students declining. Based on this change in forecast, we've identified some next steps we'll be exploring in an attempt to course correct. In reviewing the data behind the forecast, we noticed a significant amount of overtime being utilized by certain areas of the district. We've met with supervisors and will be monitoring this closely through payroll and human resources. We will also be working with our special education team to consider alternative structures for contracted substitute use. We will be meeting with the Arizona Department of Education to look at pursuing high-cost special education grants that may be able to help provide additional financial supports to cover services for specific special education students. We will continue to push open enrollment in an attempt to bring more students into the district where we have capacity, and we will be doing a more detailed look at the changes in spending from 2024 to 2025 in order to see if we can identify other areas of focus. These are all efforts towards course correcting our revenue and expenditures. However, there are some structural budget opportunities that I will share with you next.
Can I ask a question before you move on? Can you just tell me more about this overtime issue?
Sure. You probably will recall, I think it was last year, we moved quite a number of positions that were salaried to hourly because we were anticipating a change in, I always say the wrong law.
Fair Labor Standards.
The Fair Labor Standards Act. That change actually didn't come to fruition at the federal level. They pulled it back at the very last second. We moved forward with our change for a number of reasons. One, so much work had gone into that change. Two, some of the positions that we had salaried, upon deeper reflection and review, we weren't really certain that they truly met the requirements to be salaried. So it from a legal perspective, it was a much more advantageous position to be in, to have those positions be hourly, because you're never going to get in trouble with the Department of Labor for having people be hourly, but you could very much get in trouble for having people be salaried that don't meet the qualifications. I apologize for the cough. So that's really the origin of the issue. It's really primarily one employee group at our schools.
Okay, so procedurally, what is the approval process for overtime? And I'm assuming at this point we've already had a conversation and maybe how that should go?
Yeah, so overtime approval has been handled at the supervisor level, which is why we had the conversations at the supervisor level. There's no external to the supervisor-employee relationship approval for overtime. And because the district manages salary and benefits costs at a district level, it's not assigned to any school or department budget to be managed at that level. Frankly, there's no real incentive to manage that cost.
Okay. Other than someone is going to look at that, and if overspending continues, there will be changes made to the people making those decisions, I would imagine?
Right.
Okay. But since this is in this presentation, just to reiterate, those conversations are already being had now, and so this should be less of an issue going forward?
That's the hope. So we had the conversations this past week. Sandy and I will continue to monitor overtime. I actually looked at hours versus expected hours for every single hourly employee in the district for every single pay period
Of course
through
you did.
today. So I'm very confident to say that it really is one employee group. We have talked to all of those supervisors, and we'll continue to monitor this scenario.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, can I ask a question about the follow-up? This employee group is a group we expected that we might have some overtime from when we did this, right?
That is true. I will say it's substantially higher than I would have expected.
Okay.
Sorry to ask an operational question, but is there any way I could get some more power? This is no longer charging, and I really can't have my computer turn off.
Can I ask a question that maybe Dr. Davidson would answer while you're doing that? One of our potential next steps is continuing pushing open enrollment where appropriate. Can you give me any specifics behind how we're trying to do that?
Thank you, Ms. Moran, for that question, and it's a good question because here we are talking about revenue, and we realize that more kids in our classrooms brings us more money. We've engaged, certainly it's an ongoing process, open enrollment, working with our families and trying to support those families in getting their children where they want them to be. Over the last 3 weeks, we've asked the clerk in our area who handles open enrollment to dig deep with those families who are on a waiting list, and we started, if you remember in policy and in our regulation or practice of sorts, it lists starting in alphabetical or A through what have you for priority. So we started at the top and have begun working with our families to move if they wish or to decline the open enrollment opportunity, assuming space was there. And now as we move into this week, so that's been about a 2-week process. As we move into this week, Ms. Moran, we're starting to address what is seen as letter J, which are those students who are outside of our district, not connected to our schools. And so I'm really excited to see, hopefully some data by when we come back from fall break, or Thanksgiving break, I should say, to find out, are we having more kids into our schools that were otherwise not with us? So excited for the data, and I'll certainly share that with the board when we have it.
Okay, one item to consider is, I know there are families in neighboring districts who have tried to get into our district in the past, and we have not had capacity. So I see other schools, charter schools and that sort of thing, that advertise, that they have capacity. And so I don't know what we're to that point yet, but I do think we have had a reputation of not having capacity. So I think we would need to somehow make the public aware of that. I don't know what the best way to do that is, but I would hope that maybe that would be part of this plan as well.
And Ms. Moran, thank you for that. Last year with Michelle McDaniel, who's part of Michael's team, we began, to your point, if we had to say no due to capacity, we began also offering alternative spaces where we did have capacity, and some of our families have taken us up on that. But yeah, I hear you on that. Thank you.
I'd like to add just one other thing in that area. Something else that's exciting about getting through these wait lists, even if it doesn't result in those offers being accepted, and that is, we do still have new open enrollment applications being filled out and being submitted. And so if that wait list is low, we actually have a much better chance of being able to offer to those that are presently applying. Because of the priorities, it's very far from a first come, first serve situation. But if we can get the wait list down to nothing, essentially, it does mean that those who are applying today will be at the top of the list. And obviously, if you're applying today, it means you have interest today, and you're much more likely to actually accept. So that's part of the strategy too, is to try to get through that wait list by offering and being told either yes or no, to be able to diminish the wait list to a point that we can truly welcome in those who are applying today. So I do think this work will result in additional students. Whether or not it results in net additional students, because we constantly have children both coming in and going out, we'll see, right? All right. Are we ready for me to continue? Okay.
Yes.
As I mentioned in our earlier conversation on reserves, Medicaid is one of our only remaining reserve funds that has significantly more revenue coming in than we have planned expenditures each year. As a result, we could shift $500,000 of special education spending to Medicaid. The Medicaid fund can be used broadly for any purpose because it is partial federal reimbursement of our special education spending from M&O. And so it's not actually restricted to special education because it's replacing those M&O dollars. But many districts do use it in part to support special education services. As a district, we already do, and we can expand that usage to support the balancing of M&O either in the short or long term. We will continue to have discussions on this structure and our reserves in general to ensure we're comfortable in the specific fund level location of our reserves and the nuances that come with that. Also, through the legislative process, the one-time funds that we received last year were continued on a one-time basis for 2026. As opposed to having these revenues go to capital, as is our typical recommendation for one-time funds, I would recommend we bring these into M&O to help offset the decline in revenues we are seeing from what we were expecting. In the next portion of the presentation, I will show 2 scenarios without this shift and 1 scenario with the shift. At this time, I'll pause for any questions you might have before I continue on to the various forecasted scenarios.
Ms. Moran?
Just to make sure I heard you right on this. So Medicaid right now, we use at least partially to fund our special education, but you're saying going forward, you would consider using a larger percentage of that?
So last year, we had about $500,000 more in revenue come into that fund than we spent. And so what I'm saying is for this year or the future, we could shift roughly that amount from M&O to Medicaid. And that assumption has, I just want to make this clear too, that assumption has been in all of our previous forecasts. And when we get into the scenarios, I'll actually point out today where that is in the slides we've been looking at, because I want you to be able to see when we get to the scenario with the shift, I want you to be able to see that shift.
Okay.
But it's always been part of it, and that's where I've been talking about where our reserves are being held, because as we've, for example, last year, as we spent more in M&O than we brought in, our fund balance in M&O declined, and for example, with the Medicaid, with that $500,000, it means the balance in Medicaid increased. So in total, our reserves did what they did, but the location of the reserves have shifted.
Okay, and then is that similar to the shifting of the one-time revenues from the state, from capital to M&O? Meaning, normally we'd put that under capital because we don't want to have operations that we can't sustain with ongoing revenues. But is it the kind of thing where if we spend down the revenues potentially, or we spend down the reserves, it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, because you would take this one time and use that to replenish the reserves potentially anyway down the road?
Yes. Part of the reason I'm suggesting bringing that one-time revenue over to M&O is I'm truly viewing that as a one-time scenario. We have a forecast adjustment where our revenue is down about the same amount as the one-time revenue. And so essentially the decision we would be making is utilizing that one-time revenue to make up for the forecast adjustment. I'll talk a little bit later about the state of the state's budget. I won't go into great levels of detail. They can surprise us. We have no idea what they're going to do, but they have similar conversations to this at the state level, and there really isn't a lot of data that would support that one-time revenue continues. Of course, I honestly didn't think it would continue into 2026, so we might get lucky, but there isn't really a lot of data being talked about at the legislative level that makes it look like there really is resources to continue that into the future.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have no questions.
Mr. Mikes?
None for me.
Ms. Wallace?
No questions.
I don't have any questions.
All right. Before we begin looking at the detailed forecast, I wanted to share some of the assumptions built into them. First, we've modeled a 2% raise simply to allow us to see what our most recent raise amount looks like moving forward. When we look at projections together, you may notice that it's showing a significantly higher cost than our 2% raise has in the past. It's being driven primarily by our shift of performance pay, which did not receive the percentage increase in the past, to base pay that was done last year in our performance pay restructure. However, it also is being impacted by not continuing the practice of reducing the cost by a projected turnover rate. In response to the forecast variances, we've continued to forecast the cost increase of special education services, but have not included an increase in ADM for special education students. In these scenarios, we've kept intact the assumption that vacancies will remain consistent year to year. However, we may look at loosening that assumption as we get further into the staffing process for 2027. It's also important to note that over the time horizon covered by the projection, the district will have to consider with our community the continuation of the M&O override. These projections all assume the continuation of our very valuable 15% override. Simply, honestly, because I didn't want to bury you in so many different scenarios. We will look at 3 scenarios. Scenario 1 is an aggressive estimate of overspending M&O reoccurring resources by $3.9 million. This is the projection we've been comparing against in our conversation so far. We will look at a more conservative estimate of overspending M&O reoccurring resources by $4.5 million. We will then look at scenario 1 with the shift to Medicaid and one-time revenues we discussed. Each of these scenarios is shown in 2 slides, one that focuses on expenses against reoccurring revenues and one that focuses on one-time resources and our reserves. These 2 slides work in conjunction to allow us to understand the impact on the district's overall financial position. Namely, if we're overspending, how long can our reserves support that behavior? Or if we're underspending, how are our reserves growing compared to our targets? I will walk you through this scenario to help you better understand what we're looking at. You can see at the very top, we start with projected weighted student count and the resulting recurring revenues from the state funding formula and M&O override. We then start with a projection of where we will end this year from an expense perspective. To come to this number, we do a lot of analysis around our spending or planned spending that we can see in our accounting system and various things that can affect how that ends up, such as historical trends in the relationship between encumbrances and ultimate expenses at the end of the year, how utilities are tracking compared to what we have encumbered for them, overtime expenses, the potential cost of vacant positions if filled during the year, the budget available to our schools and departments and how those have historically been spent, an amount for utility costs increase that we calculate using historical trends, an amount for potential increase in property liability and prepaid legal costs, and then we bring those expenses forward as the starting point for the next year. We include the potential cost of the 2% raise, which you can see has a line there, changes in projected cost of Arizona State Retirement System contributions based on ASRS's estimates of contribution rates for that year, the amount of medical and other benefit cost increases the district plans to absorb, an initial estimate and the potential cost or savings from applying our current staffing standards to enrollments for that year, the set aside for increases in special ed costs that we've been discussing so much tonight, and the cost of our employees continuing on the performance pay structure and longevity stipend program. This then results in an estimated spending level that's brought forward to the next year again. Many of these figures are ones that we can attempt to influence, but we cannot always control. For example, during our budget process, we can discuss the level of raise to give, but outside of energy savings projects like significant ones we have undertaken recently, the cost of utilities is really quite difficult to manage. You can see on the last row of this table, with these baseline assumptions, without intervention, we will be overspending our M&O reoccurring resources significantly. Now, if we hold these figures at the bottom of the table in your mind, we'll move to the next slide. This is our slide that helps us look at how the differences between our M&O reoccurring revenues and expenses impact our reserves. You'll notice that the bottom row of our previous slide is brought forward as the second row on this table. We start with our current level of reserves, bring forward our difference between M&O revenues and expenses, estimate the difference in revenues and expenses in our other reserve funds, and calculate a resulting new reserve level. We then compare that against the various targets we've set in policy. You can see in this scenario, we end 2026 with no excess reserves and still within our reserve targets. However, without intervention in 2027, our reserves are estimated to be $200,000 under even our lowest reserve target set in policy. The only difference between the first and second scenario is where we ultimately end this year expense-wise. This scenario is more conservative from scenario 1 and assumes we will end the current year overspending our M&O revenues by $4.5 million. You can see under this scenario, we still end 2026 with our reserve target, with our reserves in our target range. 1.5 million under the top target, but 4.8 million above the lowest target. However, without intervention under this scenario, we would be 1.3 million under our lowest target by the end of 2027. Now, let's look at the scenario with the shift of one-time revenues to M&O and expenses to Medicaid. You'll notice that compared to scenario 1, this shows our overspending of M&O reoccurring resources in 2026 as 3.4 million, or 500,000 less than in scenario 1. This is due to shifting 500,000 to Medicaid. We will see that and the impact of the one-time revenues on the next slide. I'll bring your attention to a couple of different figures on this slide. First, you can see the projected change in other reserves went from 868,000 on other slides to 368,000 here. That change is the movement of 500,000 of expenses from M&O to Medicaid. The remaining 368,000 is almost entirely made up of projected changes in our gifts and donations funds, which can be more difficult to access at the district level. This practice, if continued, would shift our reserves from primarily being an M&O, indirect cost, and Medicaid to having gifts and donations play a more significant role. Additionally, on this slide, you can see the infusion of 491,000 of one-time resources into M&O. As a result of this structural change in this scenario, we would end 2026 with a tiny amount of excess reserves and be within our reserve target for 2027, but be significantly below it for 2028 with a significant amount of our remaining reserves difficult to access because of that shift of more of our reserves being in gifts and donations. One thing that we can think about too, and again, I just didn't want to show so many different scenarios, is we aren't required to move all of the one-time revenues to either M&O or capital. I can split it. And so if it is the desire of the board to end 2026 without excess reserves, we could probably target that with how much of the one-time resources we move from capital to M&O. I would recommend this movement for 2026, but honestly not as a long-term strategy because of where the reserves would end up being. This slide shows a summary of all the scenarios we've looked at this evening to help us try to come to a conclusion. Ultimately, without intervention, overspending of M&O revenues is likely to be between 3.9 million and 4.5 million, as we've discussed. And as we've looked at the individual scenarios, reserves are showing a need to address this imbalance by 2027. Due to the structural changes it would cause and where our reserves are held, I would recommend the structural budget change we discussed for this year, but not necessarily as a long-term strategy. Before moving on to state-level context, other local considerations, and our timeline for the budget cycle, I'd like to pause to see if there are any questions on what we've shared so far.
Yeah. Ms. Moran, Ms. Moran, any questions?
Yeah, so one of the things I did in looking at this was to try to look at where our forecast was when we looked at this at BART and where our forecast is now. So one of the things that you mentioned that's impacting this is, of course, the special ed. And so we already talked about that, I think, for the most part. The second piece is the salary. So we made changes to the base salary. And so that is potentially impacting this forecast by about $300,000 to $350,000. I know we're, as you mentioned, we're just assuming a 2% raise. I guess I would say if we have to tighten our belt, maybe we look at something less than 2%. Maybe we look at a 1.6% or however, that would shake out so that we can get to a balanced budget. I know that will not be popular and will not be fun, but if we're looking at a realistic forecast here, which it's hard for me because a forecast is only as good as the assumptions that you're making. So, I look at 2030 and I think we'll never get there, of course. But we have to start talking about it now. So I'm completely in favor of basically controlling whatever we can control in the current year, in 2026, to make sure that we don't get to those danger places in 27 or 28 that we've seen other neighboring districts get to. And so I know there are a lot of different things that we can talk about. I'm sure that you all are talking about some of these things as well. And so I look forward to hearing more about those things. Some things that I'm thinking about as a board member are our campus profitability, are some of the additional revenues that we've talked about being able to potentially utilize with some of the land that we have and things like that. So I want us to continue those conversations to, of course, look traditionally at all the different categories and where we can cut back on expenses, but also to look outside the box as well and be creative and find a way to raise this danger flag now and make sure everyone's aware that these are going to be positive changes, I think, in the long run. But we can't wait. We do not want to wait. At least that's my opinion as a board member.
Mr. Owens.
I have no questions, thank you.
Mr. Mikes.
I agree with a lot with what board member Moran said as far as taking advantage of some of those controllables that we have right now, and then wait, and as we have other possibilities of resources coming in, I totally agree with that piece. I mean, there's like she said too, I mean, there's a lot of stuff embedded in the forecasts that sometimes we just don't know what really is gonna work. And of course, when you get all the way to 2030, some of that stuff can look pretty scary, and so taking proactive steps is important with this. So,
Ms. Wallace.
I don't have any questions, thank you.
I don't have any questions either. I'm sure you're going to come up with a lot of great options for us to discuss that don't involve taking away our 2% raise, hopefully, for our teachers. I would like that to be like a last option if we're looking at cutting. So.
And I honestly do think we're seeing this budget process that we've developed honestly work. And what I mean by that is we are in an okay spot right now. The data is telling us we need to make a shift. We're seeing that at a time where we are able to make a shift. We aren't, I hate naming other districts, but we aren't in the position that other districts are in. And this process of looking forward and looking at current and seeing what that may look like, I believe is a strong process to help keep us going in the right direction. And so I think this conversation is really evidence that our process is working, because you know, it's highly likely that we end this year without excess reserves, and I think that's been a mutual goal of the governing board and of myself, at the direction of the governing board. And it's also alerting us to the fact that we can't maintain that level of spending that is allowing us to spend down the excess reserves and allowing us to address it before it becomes a truly significant problem. So I just wanted to share that, yes, to a certain extent, I think forecasting out to 2030 does give really unrealistic numbers, because it's assuming that we're not doing our jobs by adjusting when these forecasts say we ought to, right? So, all right, I'll get off of my soapbox there. We've covered some of the Litchfield specific context. Now I would like to share a couple of updates on the state level that color what we might expect from the state in their next budget. The aggregate expenditure limit is a provision of the state constitution which limits the aggregate spending of school districts in the state regardless of appropriations approved in the state budget. In the past several years, this limit has been exceeded, and the legislature has approved allowing school districts to exceed the limit. Luckily, for the year we're currently in and for next year, the aggregate expenditure limit has been addressed, but it's not been addressed long-term, and it will be an item we have to keep an eye on each year. I just don't like letting that fall off our radar, because if that ever were not to be approved by the legislature, it would be very significant, not just for Litchfield, but for the entire K-12 system in Arizona. Based on recent information published by the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, which helps monitor and forecast the state's budget, very similar to the process we're going through tonight, the budget is expected to have $66 million to cover one-time costs for 2027, which sounds like a positive position until you realize all of the items they consider to be one-time, which are realistically ongoing. The JLBC even has a name for these items: ongoing one-time. Included in these ongoing one-time costs is $183 million of appropriations to the School Facilities Oversight Board. In their most recent presentation to their Finance Advisory Committee, the JLBC shared that there are at least $580 million of 2026 one-time appropriations to be considered for the $66 million of available resources, including at least $378 million that are already considered a very perplexing ongoing one-time expense. As a result, we do not presently anticipate significant additional increases to the base support level or other revenues beyond those already anticipated by the JLBC, which includes the standard 2% adjustment to the base support level and a similar increase to our capital funding. Additionally, maintaining the one-time funding that we're shifting to M&O here for 2027 will be a challenging conversation at the legislature given that state-level budget context. Another significant local consideration is the Arizona Public Service rate case, presently making it through the Corporation Commission process. APS is advocating for a 14% rate increase, which is not included in the projections I've shared today. As you can see, in 2025, we spent $2.6 million with APS, and our utility costs tend to rise each year, even without significant rate increases. One of our water utility providers, Liberty, is also in the process of requesting a 38.4% increase on water charges and 53% increase on wastewater.
What was the water percentage again?
38.4. In case the legislature cares, I would love a 38.4% increase in my per student revenue.
Can I ask a question on the APS
Yeah.
slide? Can you tell me how, I believe the idea behind our work with Verigy was to keep at least some of our utility costs even with what we're currently paying. Are we seeing any of that yet?
We are not yet, because so much of that work is still being constructed. I'm very hopeful that we will see some of it next year, but attempting to forecast that really, honestly, shouldn't have much of an impact on the forecast, because the entire intention of the energy water savings programs is to utilize that savings to pay for the improvements that were done. Where long-term, and when I say long-term, I mean hopefully before my retirement, we see savings is after that energy water savings lease is paid off, and we're still benefiting from those increases. Right now, the benefit of those improvements is primarily twofold. It does serve as a bit of an insurance in that it helps cap our increase, and so through, for example, the solar projects, we will become less reliant on APS, and so the increase will hit us less than it would without the solar. The other significant increase, and I suspect those of you who were on the board will recall this, my first year in the district, we struggled to a certain extent to replace HVAC units in a pace that kept up with their decline. And the Verigy work really did allow us to solve that problem in a way we were struggling to do so on an individual basis.
Okay, so the Verigy work is really more of an investment in the ongoing maintenance of the equipment. It isn't really, because we're paying back the leases and stuff, so it isn't really keeping us even. We're still going to see rate increases on top of that.
We will. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
While we're on utilities, really, I just want to make sure I kind of understand it, because that was one of the things that stood out from the March to November numbers. You know, for instance, 2027, it's showing 486,000, as opposed to the forecast in March was 206,000. I mean, that's captured in?
So that's primarily me really looking back at how we actually ended 2025 and updating that historical trend data that I used to forecast the increase in utility costs to incorporate 2025.
So it's over 100% increase.
Yeah. You can see how the rate of increase has changed even on the APS data that I have on the slide there. It really has continued to increase over the last handful of years.
And then just for clarification, that's obviously
on top of that, they want a
without-
14, yes.
And whatever this Liberty utility percentage increase could be?
I don't want to misspeak, so I'm just
Okay.
going up on my. So Liberty is in the process of requesting a 38.4% increase on water and a 53% increase on wastewater.
Thank you.
I'd be happy with either of those percentages coming to my revenue.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yeah.
Excuse me. I just wanted to add with the Verigy piece, if we go back to that, the guaranteed savings rate is a minimum, because that's the one thing they can't control. And so it puts us in a very difficult spot. But as Mr. Vaughn highlighted, the work with HVAC units already, replacing over 500 of them, we will start to see some of that savings this year. And built into the deferred maintenance to the bond program were replacement of other units along the way. So we'll continue to work through that to ensure our HVAC units are in the best possible place than they've been in a long time. as we start to talk about the bond sale number 3 in the near future here. That will allow Mr. Ensign and our guys to start working on what that deferred maintenance can do to help with that also.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just glad that we have been doing that, because otherwise, what would we be looking at for expenses?
It could be very gloom, yes.
All right. I agree, though. It does make me thankful for our work in trying to manage our reliance on some of these providers. Considering all of this context, both internally and external to our organization, the district needs to begin moving back towards a structurally balanced budget. We are on track to spend down all our excess reserves, which is appropriate, but if we continue as projected, it will be very difficult to rebalance due to the increases being ongoing in nature, and our reserves are projected to go under our lowest targets set in policy. As a result, we recommend targeting a reduction in expenses for 2026-2027 school year. There are several reasons to begin working towards balancing our budget. The trends we are seeing in special education costs and enrollment uncertainty are statewide issues and will continue applying substantial pressure to our financial position. The opening of Troy Gilbert will have an uncertain impact on the budget. More facilities typically means more overhead costs. The uncertainty and potentially large increases in our utility costs that are potentially on the horizon, and our reserves projected to fall below our lowest level reserve targets without intervention at the end of 2027 are all reasons to begin this work now. As a result, we are proposing the following goals for the 2026-2027 budget process. First, pursue a structurally balanced budget, or at least get closer to that mark. Second, target competitive compensation for retention and recruitment. And third, maintain a timeline for transparent contract issuance for staff. At this time, I'd like to pause for questions and discussions before we move on to discussing our timeline for the budget process.
Ms. Moran.
I would just say that I'm in agreement that we need to start action sooner rather than later on the controllables that we can take action on. I am in favor of the scenario 3, the shifting of the one-time funds, as well as the split, as you mentioned, in potentially the capital or the one-time from the state, in order to get us right to our target, basically from a reserve standpoint. I think that would be great. And then from there, we'll have to just take it year by year and be a little agile as things come up. But yes, I'm in agreement with the goals and look forward to continuing the discussions.
Mr. Owens.
I know when I've asked before, like our reserves, right? You always talk about how not all that money is accessible, or it's kind of not there, but it's in a reserve. What's the ability, say, after the end of the year, we do have more reserves than we wanted, right? We're above the top end or the middle. How easy is it to shift those funds like immediately to cover something that's deficient, or put it in like that's a one-time then, right? Okay, end of the year, we have all this money, now we can use it one time. Can we do that? Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense, but I'm thinking my mind might
So
be
at the end of the
thinking
year,
of
we
it
have a bunch of money
backwards.
left over, let's spend it. We have that, right? If we're over budget.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things we could do if we wanted to quote unquote spend it. We could prepay some expenses. There are some expenses that school districts are legally allowed to prepay. One scenario on that we will likely talk about in other contexts in another time is we can prepay our ASRS contributions. Why that's such a fascinating option is while there's a balance of prepayment with ASRS, they invest that money just like they invest the pension pool. So there's actually opportunity to earn much more of a return than we could through the avenues districts are allowed to directly invest their monies. We could, in theory, have a governing board meeting and approve a one-time stipend type scenario, like a signing stipend for signing your contract by a certain time or something like that. The problem is to have that be board approved in time to spend it before the end of the year, you're still not going to have those final numbers. It's still a projection, right? Trying to spend it at the very end of the year when you have certainty, really your only real options would be to prepay something that I could prepay at a moment's notice and just, send the check.
Can we prepay our? Jeez, can we prepay our APS bill?
Yeah, I don't know if I want to give them any more of our money than necessary, simply just because that doesn't actually get us any benefit. But we could, at this point, our biggest benefit would be either to prepay ASRS or we could send some money towards Valley Schools, who also invests proceeds from school districts. But those really would be our two real options that could be done at the very end of the year. Now that I think of it, there's also an opportunity to prepay ESI, and they provide a small discount if you do so. I do think it would be more financially advantageous to have the money actually invested than just pursue that discount. But those are the only three that I think really truly could be done at the end of the year when you have certainty of what the numbers are.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're thinking of all the things. It just seems like we're projecting everything. How do we know for sure at the end, right? So, thanks.
Mr. Mikes.
No questions for me.
Ms. Wallace.
I have no questions. I'm learning a lot today. I feel like this is very in-depth. I'm not trying to be funny. I really am learning a lot, and we've heard a lot of information.
Well, I'm glad you're learning a lot. I mean, there's a reason I call this presentation the budget context, right? Because we're trying to set the context for our budget work for next year. And I hope that we're in agreement that we've done that tonight, and really kind of set some direction on what our goals are for the 2027 budget. And I really do honestly think we needed all of this context to do that successfully.
I don't have any questions. We are learning a lot. I won't even complain that it's 37 slides because it's really important information and it helps us to be better board members and to make more informed decisions going forward. So,
President Zajma, might I interject, please, real quick? Just wanted to highlight one of the words that's on the screen right now. It says transparent. And one of the things that we've done, not just in tonight's presentation, but also we've shared this information with our administrative team as well as our superintendent's advisory committee, just to let them know where we are, kind of what's in front of us, and how we do want to be transparent, but also there may be a time in the near future where we do have to take action, to Ms. Moran's point. And so we are seeking feedback from those groups, just to, essentially showcase that their voice does matter in this thing called education that we give here in Litchfield L. And just excited to see what we get from them, but just wanted to highlight how important that transparency piece is to all of us.
As we look forward to the budget season, we can see tonight we're discussing budget reserves, our timeline, and other goals for the budget process. In January, we hope to have data from our compensation study. All of this feedback work we'll be doing, and our initial administrative recommendation or ideas for the 2027 budget cycle, work calendars, and contract language. In February, we will have additional budget discussions, providing more clarity and direction on the initial thoughts or ideas. And in March, we will have the benefits renewal discussion and hopefully bring closure to the budget process with a renewal list and issuance of contracts with any approved changes in compensation included. At this time, the team is available to answer any questions you might have on the district's proposed budget process for fiscal year 2027.
Ms. Moran?
No, timeline looks good, and I've had all my questions answered, so thank you.
Mr. Owens?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Mikes?
None for me. Thank you very much, though.
Ms. Wallace?
None for me, and again, thank you for all of the scenarios and all of the information. I appreciate my education on the budget tonight.
No questions, just thank you. This is a lot of work, and we appreciate all the time that you put in and all the thought that goes into making sure that we can understand this, and that the community, when they decide to watch this and they have questions and we point them to this presentation online, they'll be able to understand it better. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one more presentation. It's the 2025 Achievement Comparisons and Letter Grades, and this will be by Director Owen.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Mr. Superintendent. I'm going to give us just a moment. Thank you, Tech Team. I'm Brian Owen, Director of Assessment and Accountability, and tonight what we'd like to do is update you on some recent data that has come out from the State Department since our last achievement update that we gave. There's a lot of this data aligns to that readiness pillar. The first thing I would like to talk about are the 2025 AASA proficiency comparisons statewide. So that's one of the files that ADE has released since our last meeting. Just want to remind you of the state trend. This is 5 years of state data, and really when you look at our 5-year trend at the district, it looks very similar to the state's trend. When you look at stability, increases, and decreases, there's one that stands out to me is that decrease in 6th grade math in our district, which we did not see at a state level. Here, just to remind you of the AASA statewide comparison, Litchfield Elementary School District proficiency in yellow, and the overall average state proficiency in blue. So this data we haven't presented yet. One of the things I like to do with that statewide public data is I like to do district comparisons. So there are 3 main comparisons that I like to look at just to see where Litchfield falls. One of them I like to do is this Auditor General peer group. These are the most similar districts in Maricopa County to Litchfield. It does look a lot like last year. Kyrene and Litchfield are
very similar scoring. And in fact, Kyrene in Maricopa County is the most similar district to Litchfield that I've seen. Then I like to compare to this group of 10 West Valley districts. It looks very similar to what we saw last year. You can see in ELA, Litchfield at 49%, and in math, Litchfield here at 42%. And then I just like to see overall at the state level, and I know that's really difficult to read on here. This is ELA, but for all non-charter districts, if I rank order them, where does Litchfield sit? And I do want to point out that these are reported districts. And you can see, if you can read some of those names, you can see some of the districts that have higher proficiency than Litchfield, a couple that have lower. You see a lot of traditionally high-scoring districts. That's what ELA looks like. Here's what math looks like. And then to sort of summarize, this is what our statewide ranking has been over the last 4 years. You can see scores did come down slightly here at Litchfield, and that's represented there in the rankings and the percentile. And again, this is a comparison of reported districts. So there's a minimum N count that needs to happen before the state can release it publicly for FERPA reasons. I'm under the impression there are about 270 districts, non-chartered districts in Arizona. So if you look at ELA, there's 190 reported districts. If we were to look at all the districts, that percentile probably would be different, because if a district doesn't have at least 10 proficient students, it's not reported. So those are probably a lot of districts that have very few proficient students. Any questions about the statewide data and district comparisons?
Ms. Moran?
No, no questions. Thank you.
Mr. Owens?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Mikes?
None for me.
Ms. Wallace?
No questions.
No questions.
Beautiful, I'll move on. The second part of this is our school letter grades and district letter grade. This was released, if I remember correctly, Wednesday, October 29th. So since the last time we met. And just a brief review of the state's definitions of each of the letter grades. And just want to point out the difference in language there from distinguished performance, high performance, adequate performance. There for the ABC. Brief overview of the model components: 50% growth, 30% proficiency, 10% EL, and then the final 10% in that, what they call acceleration readiness, which is just sort of a whole group of individual indicators. The state board did approve the cut scores. They're the same as last year. 84.00A, 72.00 is the B cutoff, and 60.00 is the C. So here's a summary of all of the data for all the components for all the schools that were released. I'll give you just a second to look at it. And I do want to point out the footnote that I have here. So if you see the percent tested for Verrado Elementary, it's low. That's because the scoring center did not receive a box of scorable test documents for Verrado Elementary. And it was a total of 80 grade 3 math documents. And I'll also point out the highlighted cell, Rancho Santa Fe, is under review. I submitted an appeal for them yesterday, and I'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about appeals here at the end. So in summary, 9 A schools, 4 B schools, 2 Cs, and then Rancho Santa Fe right now is under review. And then the district will also got a letter grade, which they just use a straight grade point average calculation by using all the grades at all the schools, A4, B3, C2, and the calculation currently comes out to a 3.47. 3.50 is the A mark. If Rancho Santa Fe's appeal is granted, that district GPA will change to 3.55. And some highlights and celebrations. So we had 2 schools that made the jump 2 letter grades. Thomas Hecht, Dreaming Summit, went from a C to an A. 2 of 10 schools statewide that accomplished that. And we have 3 schools ranked in the top 10% of all non-charter evaluated schools: Belen Soto, eyeing that 100-point mark, Litchfield Elementary, and Verrado Elementary. And again, just the footnote about the scorable materials that were lost and not scored, that would impact third grade math proficiency. We don't know how because they never got scored, but there would probably have been an impact there. More celebration. Scott Libby Verado Middle did move up one from a B to an A, and the overall district GPA increased to 3.47 pending that outcome of the appeal. We do have a couple areas of focus. So Corte Sierra, Western Sky, dropped one letter grade, B to a C, and as well did Roby and Mabel from an A to a B. So for the appeal that I submitted for Rancho, I submitted under the category of adverse testing conditions. They had a technology issue that required the students in the middle of a test session to stop testing. So they sat in front of computers for about 3 hours while we tried to figure out if it was something on our end, something on the state's end. And because it was so widespread, it was 71 students trying to test. The state said, just discontinue for now. We'll have to figure it out later. We did. But my argument is that the disruption was so great, it had a negative impact on those student scores. And that was in the third grade math. So this is what the appeal timeline looks like. It closed yesterday, so the committee will evaluate all the appeals and then send a recommendation to the state board at the end of January and update the files sometime after that. We will know at the district what the recommendation will be before that board meeting. And that's my update. Any questions for me?
Ms. Moran?
No questions. I would like to say that I am encouraged that overall we are moving our GPA up in the right direction. Hopefully we get that little nudge from Rancho as well. And I want to give kudos to LTH and Dreaming Summit for their move up to A's this year. So job well done.
Mr. Owens?
Yeah, no questions. I always appreciate your presentations and just how concise they are and to the point, so appreciate
Thank
it.
you. I appreciate that.
Mr. Mikes?
Yeah, no questions for me. Thanks for all the information and breaking it down. Congratulations to all the schools with their movement, especially two that moved 2 steps for sure. That's a huge accomplishment for the community to see as well. So I appreciate all that.
Thank you.
Ms. Wallace?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you.
No questions, but like my other board member said, congratulations to LTH and Dreaming Summit for their phenomenal growth that they showed this year. That's a true testament to their staff and to their leadership there and the work that they put into doing that. I was able to talk to Ms. Hill the other day when I was there for the Thanksgiving feast, and she talked about how she just started crying when she saw her score. It was very exciting for her because I know that she was hit hard last year. So, and I know that our teachers and our staff all take it very personal with some of these grades. So I'm very excited for them to see that growth for them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we're just going to try to move this along and get out of here quickly. We're going to move on to legislative updates. That will be Dr. Davidson.
Thank you, President Zaida, members of the board. This is a new little item we try to put in at least every once in a while, just to keep the board abreast of the things that are happening across our local government. So bottom line, the legislative session is getting ready to get moving. Here's what I do know. February is an important date for us. It also is for the legislatures, with them having certain timelines in which they can drop and propose their bills. This session as a whole, the 100th day of the legislative session would be April 21st. But we know that often gets extended. So just kind of putting those timelines out in front of our board just as a piece of information. Certainly, we know Prop 123 is going to continue to be a topic of conversation. But inside that, and Mr. Vaughn spoke to that a little bit about state revenue and what that might look like and how that impacts the vote on and the work behind Proposition 123. Other areas of contention inside that conversation will be protections for ESAs, teacher salary as it relates to state creating and maybe adding additional resources for teachers, the school capital lawsuit that's out there and how the legislature chooses to address that. Those are all some things that we have to be mindful of, and certainly we'll keep our ears open to. Mr. Owens, you spoke to this, I believe, a little bit, the idea of dead cash and how do we, in school finance, address that money that we have sitting in our coffers that we can't use. Vacant space will be a topic of conversation. Certainly, there's been some conversation as well about deregulation to Title 15, which is the Arizona revised statute that applies mostly to education. There's a lot of conversation in areas around superintendent qualifications, transparency, salaries. You've seen a little bit of that on the news. Certainly, student behavior and supports for staff will remain a topic of conversation, as well as graduation requirements. So, bottom line, I anticipate, just as last year and years before, it's going to be a busy legislative season, and certainly education will be impacted, I guess, either positively or negatively, depending upon how you look at it. So I'll keep the board posted, but just wanted to bring you some information. Thank you.
Ms. Moran, do you have any questions, comments?
No, no questions.
Mr. Owens?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Mikes?
None, thank you.
Ms. Wallace?
No questions, thank you.
None either. Thank you for that update. I look forward to our legislative session next year. It will be very interesting. Okay, we're going to move on to reports. We'll start with Dr. Davidson.
All right, I get to continue with the mic. Thank you, Madam President. Per Mr. Owens' presentation on data tonight, I'm certainly proud of our students and departments for their aligned efforts in helping us to meet our district's mission of student success. Student success is seen in measuring ways and in a variety of ways as our staff and students build in the areas of the Litchfield learner. And so just a reminder to our folks out there and in the audience tonight: communication, character, teamwork, problem solving, continuous learner, and content expert. So that happens in a variety of ways. Some areas I just wanted to highlight since we met last, and many of our board members have had a chance to attend some of these things. Schools had amazing trunk or treat experiences for our families, Veterans Day celebrations, a lot of things going on with Love Our Schools Days. The most recent Thanksgiving feast had a great turnout at Litchfield L today, and even despite the rain or in spite of the rain, so it had a great turnout. And just want to highlight as well the work that our curriculum team is doing, just to ensure that our students are getting what they need at the first best instruction, tier 1 level, and teachers and our administrators alike really becoming content experts. Today, as a matter of fact, we had our administrators and coaches learning more about our science curriculum, both at the elementary and at the middle school level. Some things to think about as this season moves along, and you'll hear a little video coming here in the near future just around our staff and our governing board and just being thankful for everything that everybody's doing. Certainly have a high amount of gratitude, and just asking our team during the holiday season to make certain that they're taking care of themselves physically and mentally. An important piece for our calendars, December 2nd. That is our first community tour at Scott Libby Elementary and Verrado Heritage. We've put out, first and foremost, a strategic offer to individuals who want to attend, but Mr. Nuanas and his team will be blasting that out to the entire community here in any moment, just to really try to ensure that we have people who are interested in seeing and hearing and learning about what's in our schools. And lastly, wanted to highlight the efforts on behalf of many of our administrators here at this table. We were asked by ASBA and ASA at their annual conference in December to do a presentation and to highlight, again, some of the real positive work that's happening in our district. Our title for that conversation will be Our Northern Lights, Making Vision Visible All Year Long. And for us, again, that's around student success. So thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. We'll move on to reports from the governing board members. We'll start with Ms. Moran.
I love that title. I'm kind of obsessed with the Northern Lights, so kudos on that. So for my report tonight, let's see, I was able to attend another Safety Road show at Belen Soto. So I want to give a shout out and a thank you to Director Moss and Director Fletcher for your clear presentation and the Q&A that informs our students of the consequences of their actions and helps to keep our students and staff safe, which is our top priority. Keep up the good work with that. I was also able to attend the first school showcase of the year, which was at Western Sky Middle School, and it proved to be both informative and productive. I especially appreciate that Principal Harge and AP Gold addressed topics aligned with our Believe, Belong, Become mission. Thank you for hosting us at Western Sky. I also was able to attend the Agua Fria High School District Veterans Day Breakfast, and that is a community event that recognizes veterans and supports the junior ROTC program at Agua Fria High School. I was honored to attend this celebration. And lastly, I was able to take some time to serve at 2 Thanksgiving feasts, one at Western Sky Middle School and the other at Palm Valley Elementary. It's always a joy to see parents and families on campus spending time together and enjoying a delicious meal served with love by our staff and volunteers. Thank you to Dr. Mary and Carl and all of our food service department for your hard work to make this an annual tradition. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone has a wonderful Thanksgiving and are able to spend time doing what you love with the people that you love. And I hope that this can serve as a reminder to be in the moment because we are not promised tomorrow. So I'm going to close with lyrics by the Tragically Hip and their song Ahead by a Century. With illusions of someday cast in a golden light, no dress rehearsal. This is our life. Thank you.
Mr. Owens?
All right. It is school showcase season, which I always enjoy. So I got to attend the first one at Western Sky Middle School. Also attended what's could likely be the last one at El Thomas Heck, but it's the first one for Troy Gilbert, or no, it's second, whatever. But just awesome to see the campus and knowing that they went from a C to an A and how things have really turned around there, and I think it's a lot of momentum going into next year when we open up Troy Gilbert. So that was really cool to see. I had my one-on-one with Dr. Davidson. Personally, I attended the Verado Elementary School Apex Fun Run. I didn't participate this year, which was probably good. I would have saved myself some embarrassment there. Yeah, I unfortunately didn't get to attend any of the Thanksgiving feasts. My wife did, and she just said it was awesome. So appreciate all the staff and everything that helps make those happen.
Mr. Mikes?
All right, so I agree with Board Member Owens about the showcases, and when they come around, I really enjoy getting down to visit each one of the campuses. Unfortunately, I had to miss the El Thomas Heck one, but I did go to Western Sky. That was great to sit through and visit with some of the students that came in to talk to us about some of the great things going on over there. So that was exciting. And then the other 2 things specifically were the Thanksgiving feasts. Went to Verado Middle to help out, and Mabel Paget. Definitely 2 different experiences with what the Thanksgiving feast could look like. It was great, kind of was at Verado, getting a chance to see how quickly Sam could dish out the cranberry sauce. So good job on that piece as they're coming through. I had to take that over, by the way, when you ditched us later. But on to more important things, I'm sure. Anyways, that was a great experience. And then at Mabel Paget, I have to admit, one of the most interesting things was when you still had more things to give these elementary kids, more stuff that had to be on the plate. However, the plate was absolutely full. So where the milk goes and where the silverware went and all that stuff, and seeing them grab that with their 2 hands, and it is a miracle that most of them made it to the table. So kudos to all those students that were successful with that. But massive shout out to the food services department for taking care of that stuff. I mean, they're all in. They run it with efficiency. With all the volunteers that come in, they're set. They know where everybody needs to go. It's quite a process, and it's great because everybody's walking through there with smiles on their faces. Parents are there. You know, it's just kind of a nice little connection that parents get to have with the campus that they get every so often. So great experiences for that. So thank you.
Ms. Wallace?
I was able to attend the Western Sky Showcase as well, which was very nice to get to see that campus and talk with the leadership there. And I was able to serve at the Palm Valley Thanksgiving, and I got to see all the grade levels come through, which was a lot of fun. And my husband actually was able to serve with me for a little while there, and it was a good family serving day. And it was a great experience. What our food service is able to do and the amount of people they're able to feed is really amazing. So I would highly encourage parents to volunteer for that, not just go eat with your kid, but, you know, serve for an hour and see what that's like. So it was a really great experience to do that as well. And I think that's all I have.
Okay, this has been a busy month. I was realizing as I was going through all the things. I was able to attend both the Western Sky Middle School Showcase as well as the Thomas Heck / Troy Gilbert. Very different feelings at the campuses because each of our schools have different feels, right? But they were both equally informative, and I really appreciated the staff that talked to us, the students that talked to us, and the principals. So thank you to the principals for putting those together for us every year so that we can come and see them. I also was able to attend the Agua Fria Veterans Day breakfast event. I appreciate that they invite us to come, and that is a nice event where they can recognize the veterans that have come in and are now serving our students who have served our country in the past. And I appreciate all of the people that do that anywhere in this country, but I really appreciate people that come into the schools, especially we have a lot of them here in our district as well. And so thank you to all of the men and women who have sacrificed much of their lives to the military and are now coming and helping our children be better and do better. They're really good role models for our students. So I also have an 8th grader this year, so I was able to attend the Agua Fria Academy's presentation that they have for our 8th graders that are going to be going on to high school next year. That was really informative to see what they're doing with this Academy's model that they're rolling out, and you know, they're in their 3rd year now, so I guess we'll see how that totally spans out next year when they go into year 4 with the students that have been able to be in it the whole time. I'm cautiously optimistic to see how that works out. I highly encourage parents to really dig in that have 8th graders going into high school next year and getting all the information that they need about the high schools that their kids will be going to. If you have special needs kids, I really, really encourage you to start that conversation now with the high school of what that looks like for your kiddos, because it will be a different experience. And so I do recommend that you start those conversations now so it's not a surprise when you get to high school. But they do have like transitional meetings and stuff, so that's one way. But start now, don't wait till that comes. I was also able to attend Thanksgiving feasts. I served at White Tanks, at Dreaming Summit, and then Litchfield Elementary School today, and then I have 3 more coming up later this week for a total of 6 that I'll get to serve at. The White Tanks one is one of my favorites to come to. It's small, obviously, but it's fun to see the kids there with their families. And even though they said the kids were having a interesting day that day, they were all super well behaved while I was there, and they were all excited to have their parents come in, so it was fun to be there for that one. I will say that Litchfield Elementary School might be my most memorable one I ever go to, because I got to leave as a drowned rat today because it decided to have the sky open up on us as we were finishing up and going home. So that was fun, because that doesn't happen very often. And as I've said in the past, November for our family, we always do a what we're thankful for every day, and we say something we're thankful for. So I just wanted to take a minute to say that I'm thankful to all the teachers and the support staff in our district for what they do for our students. And I'm especially thankful for all the people behind the scenes. I feel like we have a lot of staff members in this district that we could not do what we do. Our students would not be as successful as they are if it wasn't for all these people behind the scenes making sure that everything is happening. So it takes every single person in this district to make it be the success that it is. So thank you to everybody that gives their time here. And thank you to the families that choose to send their children to this district, because this district, I might be biased because all my babies have come here, but I think it's an amazing district and we have the best teachers that there are. And so you couldn't pick a better place for your kids to come. So thank you for entrusting our district with your students. And thank you to this board that I sit with. This job is a lot at times. And as a board member, there have been times when I've served on this board where it's been less where I've wanted to be here than others, but I currently really enjoy being here and doing this job, and it's mostly due to the people that I get to work with because they make it easier to do, and I appreciate our staff we work with, so thank you very much. And with that, thank you to everybody that gave us the administrator reports. People watching, go and read them. That's how you know what's going on. And also attend the community event that's going to come up on December 2nd, where you can see our schools in action, kind of see behind the curtain. I encourage as many people that can sign up for that to do it and see what's happening. And with that, if somebody would like to make a motion to adjourn our meeting.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
A second?
Having a motion from Mr. Owens and a second from Mr. Mikes, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Moran?
Yay.
Mr. Owens?
Yay.
Mr. Mikes?
Yay.
Ms. Wallace?
Yay.
I'm a yay. Motion passes. Thank you for joining us. This meeting is adjourned.